Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Dog Talk. This is episode 80A.
I'm Cam and this is Julie. This week's Torah portion, we're heading on through Exodus. We're starting with Exodus 6:2, going to 9:35. So the entire chapter of 9. We cover basically all the plagues, and we have a few left, but we're covering most of the plagues. Yeah. Last year we spoke just real briefly on some of the highlights. Well, we really talked a lot about the name of God that we see where the Lord says that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew me as El Shaddai, but not as Yoveh. Okay. We talked a lot about that. One thing I did want to bring up was that, I say that we are in a time right now, too, of maybe where we've known him as El Shaddai and coming to understand him even more as Yoveh.
Yeah.
When you take the letters, it's Yod, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. And each letter has a meaning, and it basically means hand revealed, nail revealed. Or the connection revealed, okay? Because a nail is a hand. A nail can be a nail, or it can also mean a connection. And I thought, the times that we really see when here in Egypt, when the people are coming to see who the Lord is as the Redeemer, bringing them out, right? The one who's fulfilling the promises.
Right.
We see this again with Yeshua. We're coming to a new understanding of who Yoveh is. And when we speak of Yoveh, that's the all-inclusive. We want to say Father, Son, Holy Spirit and divide them up and all those things. But Yoveh is really an all-inclusive, it's the headship. It's what holds it all together. And within that, you find the different traits and characteristics in which he reveals to us, like Messiah, okay? Mm-hmm. And I keep going back to the thought of the stone. The word for stone means, if you break it, it's basically the Son and the Father together. You can't separate them, or they're not the stone, right?
Yeah.
The stone the builders rejected requires both of them together. The stone that we fall upon, the stone that follows them throughout Exodus, it is both of them together, because the realization is that through the love of one, the other was given. And through the love of the other, for the Father, he gave his life. So it's so intertwined that it's difficult for us to really understand that.
And I think it's important to know that when people want to say, no, we only have to follow Jesus. Well, Jesus only followed the Father.
Right.
So by following Jesus, you're following the Father.
Yes.
So it really, you can't separate the two, even when it comes to following Yeshua as we're supposed to.
Right. You can't separate their word. You can't separate he only did what his Father, he saw him do. You really cannot separate the two.
Right.
So when we see Israel coming to the realization of who he is, that happened again with Messiah's time. And I would suggest that in the end, it happens again. The revelation that we're having in this time period is greater than ever. Even Daniel talks about in Daniel 12. Yes, and in Daniel 12 he says that knowledge grows exponentially. Mm-hmm. That understanding of who he is. Well, isn't that the goal that we see all through Exodus, especially during the plagues, so that you will know who Yoveh is?
Yes.
Because in Exodus 5, we have Pharaoh going, I don't know who he is. What does it matter to me? Mm-hmm. So, fine. The Lord's like, well, I'm going to show you. We see it all through Ezekiel also, where he says, you're going to know who I am. Well, don't we see
That's the Haftorah this week.
There you
Ezekiel.
Go. Of course. And so don't we see in Philippians that every knee shall bow, right? Mm-hmm. Every tongue confess. Because why? We have the understanding of knowing who he is. It really is the end goal. If we look in Exodus 3, we see where Moses looks up and sees the burning bush, right? He's like, hey, I'm going to go look at that. And then it says that the Lord, seeing that Moses had turned, he came down. But it was only when Moses drew near that he then drew near. In other words, he wasn't just sitting there waiting.
Right.
Moses had the job of drawing near. And again, in Exodus 4:31, we see where Moses has told the elders and told the people, and they've accepted, they bow, they give obeisance to the Lord. They are completely, they're accepting it, yes. Mm-hmm. And the Lord's drawing near. Now, the answer to their drawing near is what happens through chapter 5 on down to the plagues. I'm only going back to chapter 5 so we kind of start to get a feel of this. you see, it was once they drew near, it's time for the Lord to draw near. But when the Lord draws near, things get shaken up, right?
Yes.
Because you got to get rid of certain things for him to even be in your presence.
Right.
We know in James 4 that it speaks about when we draw near to the Lord draws near to us.
Right.
And it even speaks about to the sinner. I mean, because why? Because that's who needs to be redeemed.
Right. Because that's who we are.
That's who we
the
are.
sinners.
Right. So we see in 5 where the Lord's starting to draw near, okay, because the people have, and it doesn't look like anything like they thought it would, which is perfect because now you get a little shaken up and the Lord's like, now I can start to work with you. And then we go into 6.
They were starting to see who Pharaoh really was.
Yes.
And who the Egyptians really were.
Yeah.
Because before that, it could have been like, gosh, I'm telling you, I'm really getting a sense that sometimes we long for what.
Well, that's what it says when they go into Egypt.
What we know is coming, but when we really get down to it, we're not really ready to make that leap.
Right. And when they get out in the wilderness, I said Egypt, but when they get out in the wilderness, they're longing, they're missing the mesh pots, the meat pots, and the things the leeks and things they got in Egypt.
Right.
Okay.
The place that enslaved them. They're
but
missing the fluff.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
They're missing all the
perks.
extras, the perks of it.
Yeah.
So they're willing to go back to bondage and the false religion, really, because that's what Egypt was. It was all the false gods. That's what the plagues are supposed to be.
And they just
destroyed.
keep you comfortable.
Right.
So now that things have gotten shaken up, we move into chapter 6 where the Lord's like, oh, now let me reach down and let me take you. Get ready to be able to bring you out.
Okay.
This is where we find in chapter 6 the cups. There are said to be 4 cups that we have at Passover. And this is where it's from. And it is, the first one is the cup of salvation, or sanctification, excuse me. It's cup of sanctification. Then it's the cup of deliverance. Then the cup of redemption, and then the cup, which has a few names. So redemption, and then the last one is the cup of praise, also known as the cup of acceptance. And the third cup has another name too, besides, blessing. It's called the blessing or the redemption. Obviously, because redemption is a blessing.
Yeah.
Let's look real quick at 6:6. What it says is, say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yoveh, and I shall bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and shall deliver you from their enslavement, and shall redeem you with the outstretch of my arm, and with great judgment, and shall take for you as my people, and I shall be your God. And you shall know that I am Yoveh, your Elohim, who is bringing you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. So all this is where we get those 4 cups. The first thing that the Lord's going to do is what? He's going to sanctify them, meaning separate them. He's choosing them
apart.
Yeah. He's choosing them out of Egypt. Well, when Messiah came, didn't he do that? He set us apart.
His disciples
and he
first, and then us.
And he pulls them out. And then he allows us to come into that.
Right.
The second cup that we see has to do with deliverance. Well, once the Lord chooses them, he's now going to deliver them. He's bringing them out from their bondage, from their burdens. Well, isn't that what happened when we come into Messiah? I mean, before, while we were still sinners, the Lord is bringing us in. He chose us, all right? Now, the second one is that now we have the ability to walk with him, to be free from our burdens, from what overcomes us. You know, in Peter, it talks about what overcomes us is what controls us, basically. Yeah. Again, we have the deliverance, all right, bringing them out of Egypt. Now, the third one, like we said, was redemption, redemption with an outstretched hand. Well, every time I hear that, I just think about on the cross.
Yeah, yeah.
And in Luke 22, when Messiah says, this is the cup of the new, my blood, the new covenant. Okay, that is the one. That's the third meal. It's the third drink. It's after they've had the meal. It's also, that's why sometimes it's called the blessing, is because that's when they give the blessing to the Lord for the food that they just ate. That fourth one is where he says, look, I want you to be my people. It's kind of I don't remember if I heard it or I read it. I think I read it. A story, First Fruits of Zion. I think they had this, and they talked about. So there's a gentleman and there's a young girl. A young girl's father dies, and he leaves her with all kinds of debt. So the debtors come and say, "You have to pay it." And she's like, I can't pay it." He's like, "Fine, slavery." So she's in slavery. She's working hard. She owns nothing because she is enslaved. And one day, a man who is a good friend of her father's walks by and sees her and says, "Oh my gosh." So he addresses the owner of the young slave and says, "I would like to redeem her. I'd like to pay for her." So he pays this ransom. First, he picks her out and he pays the ransom, all right? Mm-hmm. And instead of just letting her go, he says, "Look, I'd like to marry you. I'd like you to come into my house. I'd like to provide for you for the rest of your life and have a dear relationship because I knew your father and I loved him."
Wow.
Well, that's the cups right there. Because the fourth cup is the making you my people. It's setting you apart to become a part of his
redeemable.
Family. Yeah. He's made us redeemable. What's he going to do? Just let us walk around? Sure, he gives us that option. But we've also been invited to come in and dine and remain with him.
Right.
So they did that when they left, right? He went with them out into the world, or into the wilderness. All right. Well, when Messiah came, he invited us again. And aren't we looking forward to that dinner? That
ingathering again?
Yes, the ingathering. So that's that fourth cup. Again, it's going to happen. So really, when you look at the cups that are being promised to Israel and the plagues that are being promised to Egypt, it's the two sides of the same coin. Because he's going to show who he is. He's going to show when Israel he's a loving God, and he's going to show Egypt he is the only true God.
Right. I was going to say, as he reaches down to redeem his people, you can't help but everyone on the outside getting burned.
Slammed around. Or burned. I like that better. Yeah, exactly.
It's just how it works.
Yeah. Two other things I'd like to try to cover before our time runs out. And one is just a short little thing. It has to do with Moshe. It has to do with the generations. We see Aaron is 83 years old, and we see Moses is 80 years old. We see that in chapter 7. Who cares? Why are they given that? Well, I had an epiphany.
Ooh, okay.
There's no problem when Aaron is born. There's no concern about throwing Aaron into the river, is there?
Guess not.
So that means within a 3-year time, it's now killing the children. But we know in Exodus 1 that there's a long period of time between the first time they're asking to secretly kill them, right, and then kill all of them. There's a long time in there because the Hebrews are able to even get greater, increase more. Mm-hmm. So what that tells me is at the beginning of this persecution, Moses was brought forth. At the beginning of it, which means it wasn't even having to wait. It was at the beginning of it that Moses was born and then hidden. Probably already being protected by the time everyone was ordered to be killed.
Like Yeshua.
Exactly like Yeshua.
Yeshua was already in Egypt.
Right. Because why? He was the first batch
of
being born. Yeah. Well, he was the firstborn. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. He was being preserved in Egypt, just like Moses. And I would suggest that Messiah was the first batch of the boys being born. Remember, because Herod kills them between 0 and 2 years old. And we know Messiah is older. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Here again, we see by them giving the ages, the significance of being able to go, wait a minute, Aaron wasn't in jeopardy. So that kind of tells us where that timeline unfolds. The last point, I can't really do justice to it, but I wanted to throw it out there. Again, it has to do with the plagues, which is the bulk of this week.
Right,
okay?
Right.
But there's so many good teachings out there that you can find on it that we hate to kind of go back around that when, like I said, there's just so much out there. But I did want to bring this up. As you're reading the order in which things are happening, they're all happening in a very God-given order. I really do think, I have no idea how, but I do believe that it lines up with Revelation. We know that there's 3 main things we see. We see with the plagues, the first, the fourth, and the 7th plague, okay? These are all happening early in the morning. Then we have the second, what would that be? The second, the fourth, and the 7th. That all happen where Moses goes up and says, watch out, Pharaoh, this is going to happen. They all get a warning. And then we see the next pattern where we have the 3rd, the 6th, and the 9th. There's no warning, it just happens. Now, these are interlaced between each other. In other words, it's not all morning, all warning, all no warning. It's the morning, warning, no warning. Morning, warning. Oh, that's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
That. Well, when we go to Revelation, we have the seals, the trumpets,
the bowls.
We have the thought process that the seals are the first thing that happens. It does give us that. It gives the appearance. Then the second thing, with warning, are the trumpets. The trumpets warn us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the wrath of the bowls, which happen like this. So it kind of matches this. Now, whether you take 1 through 7 of each one and start to interlace them, do they happen in order? I don't know. It could be that they're only introduced in solid sections because the Lord wants to just address each one first and not confuse us. But it could be that if you look at the 1s and the 2s and the 3s are very similar and are happening concurrently or next. I don't know, but there's so much there. And the problem is we keep assuming we understand it, and so we quit looking.
If it happens in order all neatly like that, then that completely is different than any other book of the Bible. You know what I'm saying?
Point.
I mean, I'm doing Ezekiel for the Haftorah today, and it is unreal how it's like it's a prophecy against Pharaoh, but yet it's an end time prophecy, but yet it's a prophecy for that time, but then there's an end time, and then there's this space and time, and then there's another prophecy, and then there's an end time, and it's like, whoa, it's all this big thing because it's only 7 days to the Lord,
right?
You know what I mean? I guess it's like, oh, you did this here, and you're punished here, and here, and here, and it all really goes together as one punishment.
Right.
That we see unfolding throughout. So why not? Why wouldn't Revelation be that way?
Exactly. I think that our Greek little minds want to go, nope, it has to be in this order.
Right.
But we're forgetting the Hebraic, which goes like this. And when we look at the way the challenges to Pharaoh are presented, it's to show who the Lord is, why he should obey him, and to let Israel go. The very thing in chapter 5, he questioned, the Lord's going to prove. His whole thing is, I'm going to prove it to you. Yeah. He already made the prophecy in chapter 3 that I'm basically going to take the first son, right? And at the very end, which we'll get next week, he does take the very first son. He does it. He fulfills his word. So as we come to an end, I encourage you all to read and really look at the plagues. Look for any patterns you can possibly find. This is why it's so important that we know the Word of God.
That's
and
right.
At this time, as things are being revealed, to know the Word of God for yourself, so that as you hear, the Holy Spirit can show you where to connect the dots. So I thank you so much for visiting us. We are so blessed that you spent this time with us. We hope you have a marvelous week. We will see you on the flip side with Julie and the Haftorah. Shalom! So now that things are shaken up, now
shake it up.
Shake it up. Shake it. I don't know the rest of it. As most of the songs I know, I don't know the rest of it.
Let's try that again.
Okay.